Have you ever wanted to work with chemicals that could kill you or an entire city? If you have, well, you've come to the right place. And if you don't, well, too bad. Welcome to Hazardous Materials Incorporated recruitment video. Work here is totally safe. First off, let's give a little job description and we'll go more in depth later in the video. Obviously, a hazmat is in charge of containing a hazardous material spill and putting it somewhere safe, where it can no longer cause harm to people, animals, the environment, surrounding areas, and even your own staff. The education requirement to become a hazmat is like most other jobs. First off, you must have high grades in subjects that relate to the career, such as chemistry, biology, and other sciences. Of course, you also must have a high school degree. With this high school degree, you must move on to college to study at least one of these next subjects: toxicology, chemical engineering, environmental biology, and even biotechnology. You also must have some kind of study in public health. Having knowledge in public health and protection is very, very, very key for this job, as you'll be handling chemicals that can cause damage to many communities and even some cities if not handled properly. So remember, this job is very, very dangerous, so if you don't take it seriously, you could end up hurting people, animals, environments, and even yourself in the process. Now let's stop talking about such dull topics and move on to what everyone wants to hear. How much money are you going to be making? Well, the average salary for one of these workers is $72,000. The high-end workers make $109,000 per year, and if you even have a higher level job in this career, you'll make probably even more. But the lowest you'll ever be making is about $47,000 per year. You'll also be getting a really, really cool yellow suit that you wear when you're containing chemicals, which I think is a pretty added bonus. It also protects you from the fumes, but that doesn't really matter because it looks pretty good. Now let's move on to a little bit more in depth on what you're actually going to be doing on the job. So, you're going to be helping clean up hazardous materials, obviously. You're going to be using testing equipment to identify what materials were spilled. You're going to provide instructions to communities that were around the spill and even take criticism and questions from the community itself. You're also going to maintain records of what happened on the spill, the thing that was spilled, and how many people were hurt. You're going to also assist with migrating and monitoring the sample. And if you're even in a higher level job, you'll be involved in more law. You're going to be going to the courts or doing defense or offense against the people who spilled the chemicals. You're also going to be managing and supervising the process of containment, and you're also going to provide knowledge on what the chemical was and how this can harm the environment and how this can harm people, and also give your side of whether the place where the chemical was spilled or the place where the reaction happened is still inhabitable and how much more time can pass until people can. So you may be asking yourself, how does this relate to chemistry? Well, I'll tell you. You first must obviously be able to use testing equipment to identify elements or substances that have been spilled. Using this testing equipment efficiently is important to your job, as if you misidentify the chemicals, you could possibly cause harm. Now, moving on to the most important part about knowing chemistry in this field is solubility. You must know if these substances can be soluble in water and other liquids that are used in everyday life. Because if they are, then it could possibly cause harm beyond belief. Because let's say this toxic material is soluble with water. If someone fills up a bottle of water and let's say they take a sip, that stuff is now in their system and could probably kill them if it's toxic enough. So make sure you know good and well if the element that is in the substance is soluble with water. You also must know proper lab safety, because if you do not transport these substances with proper care, it can cause more harm than it initially did. Remember, your job is to contain said substance and transport it to a more safe place. Finally, you also must have knowledge on the periodic table. You must know which elements have which properties and how much electrons do they have, other basic properties of every element. You also must know how their ions react with other things. You also must know how each element reacts in chemical reactions. So, let's say if the substance is near something that it can possibly react to and cause an explosion, you must be careful and evacuate the area immediately. Now let's take on a little bit more of a hands-on approach. Let's say, for the sake of the demo, that rock right there is a toxic chemical. So, obviously, the first state of action is to evacuate the surrounding area. Then, you're going to put on proper safety equipment. You usually put on those cool yellow suits that I was talking about, but since I don't really have one, let's just say we're using this N95 mask and surgical gloves. So, once you've done that, you must identify the chemical. Once you've identified the chemical, then you must follow the procedure. You must first make sure that it is safe to approach. Then, go ahead and begin the containment process. You usually use specialized containers and use specialized equipment to pick the solid chemical up and then bring it to the Now, once the chemical is contained, let's just say you use a substance to lower its toxicity rate. And once you're done with that, just migrate the substance back to the lab to contain it in a safe process. And for the sake of our experiment, let's just say we dispose of the chemical. Now, of course, that isn't the most accurate representation of what would actually happen, but it's what I could make do with my front yard. So that basically is what a hazmat does and how he specializes in the